in Clash of Clans, there is a standout troop, one that is so OP, it practically becomes the symbol of the game. Today, I wanted to take you down a trip down memory lane and look at the most overpowered troop every year in Clash history. The outliers that were just too hard to ignore.
Let's do this.
Starting with 2012, this was undoubtedly the Dragon. Air sweepers weren't a thing yet, there were no Inferno towers. In fact, air traps didn't even exist yet. This allowed the dragons to dominate the skies in those days. It was the first overpowered troop that you could spam and forget about. And because of this, they were the strategy of choice for top leaderboard players. Cheating or not, you don't just accidentally make it to the #1 spot. Players like Jorge Yao and others use mass dragon armies to wipe everyone's base clean. Legend says they used to do it while blindfolded. No, but really, the dragons were so easy to use. In those days, the biggest threat was air defenses and clan castle troops. That's all. And yes, dragons would remain one of the most OP troops beyond 2012, but this was certainly the year of dragons, especially after lightning spells were added. Dude, it was over for your base. Moving into 2013, the most busted troop at the time was certainly the Witch, and it all came down to 3 key factors. First up, her range. She had a 5-tile range, meaning she stayed pretty far away from all the action. She would chill at the back, behind tanks, and just spawn a bunch of lairs the entire time. Speaking of skeletons, those also triggered traps, so the Witch never got hit by any serious explosions or anything. And finally, the Inferno Tower was buns. It did not block healing at the time, and it only had a single target mode, so it could not handle all those skellies. So yeah, even the biggest and baddest defense of the time was absolutely useless against the witches. So for most of 2013, Telho 9s and 10s were shredding bases with her, usually with golems and wizards, which spawned a new strategy, go wee wee. Anyway, her range would be nerfed, and the Inferno got a multi-mode, so by the end of the year, she wasn't as OP, but she definitely remained strong for the next couple years. 2014, if you're an OG, you know what it is. The Hog Rider. So the Hog was actually picking up speed in 2013, but after countless buffs, reworks, and tweaks, and players figuring out how to use them, they were an absolute beast by 2014. What made the Hog so good was that it was just so easy to use. You train dozens of them and bring some heal spells, drop them all in the base, and make sure they don't die. Their biggest threat was heroes and clan castles. However, at the time, it was still possible to lure the clan castle to some corner of the base, and heroes were slow. Hogs went fast. So if you knew what you were doing, it was a guaranteed 3-star. Now, I love this story because Supercell ended up nerfing them in 2 of the most hilarious ways. They increased their training cost and made it so that giant bombs did 1.5 times the damage to them. Yeah, it was basically a slap on the wrist. Outside of war serious clans and those who watched YouTube videos, no one had a clue how to stop hogs from wiping their base. So yeah, 2014 certainly felt like Clash of Hogs. 2015 was a little harder than others because dragons were still powerful, witches, hogs, and golems. But if there was one outlier, it had to be the Lava Hound. At the time, one of the most powerful strategies was Penta-Loon, where you'd bring 5 Lava Hounds and a bunch of balloons. And it worked because the Lava Hounds were insanely good at protecting the balloons from any serious damage. And yes, 5 Lava Hounds was overkill, but that was the point of it. It overwhelmed defenses, especially all of the lava pups it would spawn. Now, Penta-Loon would eventually go out of style and replaced by the standard Lava-Loonian, today known as Lalo. But yeah, it certainly dominated the skies for a while, not only this year. 2016 was the year of bowlers, miners, and Valkyries. And I know I'm gonna get grilled for choosing one and not the other. There's no right answer here, but it had to be the bowlers. Listen, all you had to do was cook an entire army of bowlers and some healers, and then just spray and pray. The bowlers were kept alive by the healers for most of the battle. If that ain't busted, I don't know what is. And hilariously, the bowlers were buffed twice this year. I don't know what developers were high on. It was stupid easy, and it worked from the moment you unlocked them up to the highest town hall. Anyway, Supercell tried nerfing them by nerfing the healer, which did sort of help, but it was kind of like the hog and giant bomb situation. Now at 2017, there weren't really any outliers this year. The strongest armies included a combination of troops, not just one troop that you spammed. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be the miners. They were basically Hog Riders 2.0. Drop them all and heal them throughout the base. Just make sure they don't die. It was that simple and foolproof. They didn't die as easily as hogs as well, and this time around, the Grand Warden existed, so it basically made the miners bulletproof. Now they were stronger in 2016, but I don't think on the level of bowlers. They certainly did dominate 2017, however, because they didn't rely on the recently nerfed healers. Alright, 2018, a lot of people would probably say the Electro Dragon was OP, but I disagree, that was just easy to use. It took some good effort to consistently 3-star. You know what didn't though? El Primo. Yes, the temporary troop that was added in celebration of the global launch of Brawl Stars. It was the first limited time troop that was as strong as it was. It was essentially a very early root rider. It did 20 times the damage to walls, and it just went ham on everything else. They were also comparable to mini P.E.K.K.A.s from Clash Royale, that's a good way to look at them. And in a time when the meta was sort of leveled out, El Primo was definitely an outlier. The most busted troop for sure. They were so good that a lot of players wanted Supercell to keep them in the game as a temporary troop, but unfortunately that never happened. Nah dude, nice try though. Alright, hear me out. 2019 wasn't a troop, but a spell. Technically though, the spell deploys troops. It's a bat spell. I'm talking about the bat spell. It started out the year very strong. Even after a nerf, it was spawning way too many bats, and that's exactly why it was so good. People weren't bringing one of these, they were bringing like 6 of them and just spamming them, and they just went nuts. They were like them dang nematodes from SpongeBob. They did get another nerf in 2019, so they weren't extremely OP throughout the entire year, but that's besides the point. Not all of these were OP the entire year. They were certainly the outlier of 2019. Players were putting it in just about any army in existence. But yeah, I'm telling you, 2019, there wasn't anything absurdly OP. Other strong troops at the time were balloons and witches, but that's about it. In 2020, we have the Yeti. At the beginning of the year, I was already getting some nerfs because this thing was going crazy. And it all had to do with the Yeti mites. First off, they triggered traps, so it was kind of like the witch in the OG days where the skeletons would activate all the booby traps. Yeah, the same thing would happen with the Yeti. Also, the Yeti mites were distracting the Eagle artillery, the strongest defense at the time. And finally, they simply chewed through everything. I'm getting serious nematode vibes. So yeah, I guess 2020 could have gone to the Yeti mites alone because those were the real problem here. Anyway, after the 3 different nerfs they would get, the Yeti overall would remain pretty strong throughout the year. And I think it definitely stole the spotlight. Alright, now in 2021, I gotta go with the Super Wizard. It was nerfed pretty hard at the beginning of the year, but it remained the troop of choice for many other reasons. To sum it up, it was the blimp. You would fill up the blimp with them and send them into the core of the base, drop invisibility spells on the wizard, and they would annihilate the core of the base. Now you see it, now you don't. And yes, there were a lot of other things involved here, but in the end, the Super Wizards were the ones dealing all the damage, and boy was it some serious damage. Super Wizard Blimp became the meta. You bring it with just about any army you could think of, and it worked wonders. I think most people today use Super Archers for their Blimp, but man, in them days, those Super Wizards were putting freaking craters in your base. 2022, this one goes to the Super Dragon. Look, if you're the only troop getting nerfed several times in one year, you know something's up. The Super Dragon was deleting bases. All you had to do was spam them after a couple balloons and you'd make the base disappear. Now, I do want to add, it wasn't as foolproof as some of the previous troops we discussed. This was during a time when defense was certainly stronger than offense, but it was as easy as mastering regular dragons, pretty much. These things would get 3 separate nerfs, and even after all that, it was still so strong and spammable. So yeah, certainly the most OP troop of 2022. 2023 was an easy pick. It was the Lava Loon, the temporary event troop for Clash of Wayne. Man, was this troop busted. I don't even know if I can think of the right words to describe just how broken this was. The best I can say is that up to this point, there had never been a troop as strong. You literally did not have to do anything. You just drop the ball on the base and walk away. You could have done this blindfolded and 3-star. I'm not even kidding. They dealt so much damage, had so much HP, and deployed so many of those pups. It was unbelievable. They certainly made history. And it's funny because they nerfed these like, what, 3 times? And some really hard nerfs too, but they were OP every time they came back. Now at 2024, we got the Root Rider. Listen, I think at this point, Supercell had figured out OP troop equals more players because there is absolutely no way they didn't know how broken it was before releasing it. Basically, it was fundamentally strong. It melts through walls like butter and smashes defenses. It's a strong troop, but it was absurdly strong in 2024. You could literally cook an entire army of these and spray and pray like the good old days. They just had too much HP and dealt way too much damage. And for only 20 housing space, it was a crazy good value. The Root Rider had one of the biggest nerfs in Clash history. By June of that year, she dealt 54% less damage and had 16% less HP, which surprisingly didn't do a whole lot. It just goes to show how strong she originally was. Alright, 2025, this was a hard choice. Dragons made a huge comeback, the throwers were insane, the meteor golems took over the meta at the end of the year, and all them WWE troops were going crazy, but nothing matched how broken the Disarmor was. She was basically like a Super Valkyrie on steroids with the AI of a Hog Rider. Yes, she jumped walls too. It was crazy. She was shredding through defenses like nothing. And it doesn't stop there. She had a special ability that made her enraged for the first 20 seconds of deployment. And craziest of all, she had to get knocked out 3 times to be defeated. Of course, it wasn't uncommon to finish a battle with a bunch of them still running around. Now, unsurprisingly, she would get one of the largest nerfs in history not long after. I guess you could say they disarmed her. Sorry. And finally, for 2026, we have the Elephant Rider. OG Root Riders are back, baby. Now, really, these are basically that. I don't know how everyone is using these, but if I can train an entire army of them and span them in one line and get a 3-star every single time, something ain't right. The Elephant Riders are very strong. They chew through walls, they deal a lot of damage, and are crazy meat shields. So much so that at the end of an attack, it's not unusual to have a lot of these in their first stage. So not even like the Rider knocked out of them, which happens when the Elephant's HP depletes. They are nuts, and it was probably intentional. But then troops these days are made very OP. Honestly, it'd be a shocker to get one that's not. Anyway, it being the most recent on the list, we don't know if it'll get nerfed yet, but they are certainly the most busted troop of 2026. But yeah, that wraps it up. That was the most OP troop every year in Clash history. Let me know if you agree or disagree or agree to disagree. I don't know. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed, but hey, YouTube thinks you'll like this next video, so check it out before you go. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.